Hi, my name's Giovanna Gonzalez.
I'm Evelyn Rivera.
I'm Leslie Chavrin.
And I'm Abril Lopez.
And this is our podcast.
Yeah. Okay, so do we want to start by talking about the films that we each watched? Mm-hmm. So do we want to start off with the Haiti and Dominican Republic one?
Yeah.
So me and Giovanna could start.
So Leslie and Giovanna.
Yeah.
What do you think of the...
So it was actually really eye-opening. I actually didn't really know anything about like the Haitians or the Dominicans, like that they even shared any land in common, like or anything, and it just like really stood out to me that like they were so close. Like it was just like a river that like split both of them, and then like on one side of the river they spoke Spanish and like they were like proud of their mixed race, and then on the other side they only spoke Creole, and they were proud to be black. So that's something that really stood out to me, that they were so close and so different at the same time.
It was crazy to me also that they were all from African descent, and how, because I don't know if you remember, but since they had a dictator, the dictator like did everything in his power to kind of like make everybody forget that they like abandoned their Creole or mulatto or like African roots.
Yeah.
And then it was really cool. And then like he unfortunately that led for him to have the massacre. So it's called the Massacre River, where 15,000 Haitians were killed. And just because he said, I don't remember quote unquote, but it was mostly because they were disgracing the purity of Dominican Republic, because the Dominican Republic was the first Spanish colonialized place in the New World. Yeah. So how crazy is that? And then like how another thing that stood out to me was that in the Dominican Republic they had their heroes who had African features, but when they were when their statues were created, those features were taken off, so they were placed with more white features. So like white marble, like small nose, like smaller cheekbones, like trying to make them more European as possible. And then you go over to Haiti and you see the big contrast where it's African heroes, like high cheekbones. You could see the face structure is different. Like you could actually see their people. And it was just really shocking to me.
To bounce off of that, just because I already watched the Cuba one, and that's the same exact thing that happened within that like culture and stuff. They're Cuban heroes who were more Afro-Cuban were Europeanized. I can't say it, but they were like, their features were basically more white, and they showed the pictures in the actual film where it was like an actual picture, a photograph that was taken of the hero, and then a drawing of them, two completely different people, different features. They didn't even have the same eyes or nose, like completely different, and because they're just trying to rewrite this history and trying to erase this Afro-Latinx identification that they established, just because it's like, yeah, they're proud, or let me not just say the Cubans, but just Latinx folk in general are proud of them being Latinx and their Spanish side of that Latinx part. So they're mestizaje, I believe is how it's pronounced. They're really proud of that. But when it comes down to their black side, they're just trying to erase every part of it. And then just to connect that back to, I know we just watched the Pineapple Diaries, but one of the women in there, I forget which one it was. Was it Monse? I think it might have been Monse, who was talking about, she has a cousin who does not identify as black at all, but if you see her skin, she is a black woman. But
the part where she thought a certain guy wasn't cute because he was dark skinned, right?
Yeah. So I just think that that's really interesting, where it's just like, that's so deeply engraved in our minds now in today's society. And like the Pineapple Diaries were filmed in 2015. That's what, 4 years ago? So the fact that like our history is basically being replayed now, where it's just like, oh, I'm not black because my history doesn't tell me I'm black. I'm mestizaje, I'm Spanish, even though like my skin is darker.
So in my film, I'm Evelyn. I watched the Brazil: A Racial Paradise. So it seems like almost all of the ones that we watched, they kind of have the same, like, they don't want to be affiliated with black. Something that really caught me by surprise was that there was 10 times more slaves brought to Brazil than in the U.S. in like all of history. So that was really shocking to me. And there was a part in the film where there had been a black woman slave, and so they could either buy their way out, or if they were like with a white man, he can get them out of it. So she was with a white man, and he got her freedom. But after she was freed, she acted like she was white, and there was they made a film from her because she became really famous and really rich. In the film, she had painted her face white. Yeah, and she would act like she was white, and she ended up having 15 kids with this man, and the kids did the same thing, and they would not affiliate themselves at all with being black, even though she was a slave. Yeah,
That's crazy.
Yeah,
like
that was,
I'm actually shocked
yeah,
right now.
I know, it was that part was crazy to me as well. And in the area where she was, it was kind of far from like where because the reason they brought slaves was the sugar plantations.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of far from those sugar plantations, and in that area, the black people and the white people were like almost like the same, treated the same. They didn't really like segregate each other. But then there was sugar plantations where they were like mistreated and like stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's crazy that within like not that far from each other, there was like such crazy like differences in how they treat each other. Yeah, that was crazy too.
No, yeah, that's really like just you hear people like making fun of like the black race by doing blackface, but it's like you don't really hear somebody putting on a white face.
Right.
That's true.
But like that's the crazy part of history that they're trying to like mask. Whereas it's like now it's like I'm gonna say it's like socially acceptable to talk about blackface.
Right.
But it's like you would never hear somebody walking around like, oh, do you remember that one time like in history when we were doing whiteface?
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
that's wild. And then it's like now I see it in our society a lot, like based on the reading that we did for a history of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's not necessarily where people are trying to distance themselves from their blackness. It's necessarily like people are trying to put an end completely from black voices, I feel. And it was really crazy to see how we ended up reaching to this point, because it's like with the Black Lives Matter movement. Who was it? Somebody was trying to adapt the like premise of the Black Lives movement, but instead of adapting it, they just changed it completely to include a all lives matter movement. And in that sense, they were just trying to erase the black voice. They were trying to erase any contribution that any black person has to a movement. So it's just like, it was really cool, or not cool, sad to see how like our history from back then was just trying to do the same thing, but just by oppressing the like black man, essentially.
And there was a part in my film as well where this guy Manuel Carino, he was an advocate for black people, and he tried to have them be treated equally, and he did a lot of work, but none of it really like came out or did a lot. But then a white man did the same, and all of a sudden like that blows up, and then that leads to people being treated equally and stuff. So it's like he tried, but he was black and he didn't, and then a white man did it, and then
but then it's like, is it really equally? Because it's like the black man's voice isn't being expressed, but the white man is. Regardless if the white man is trying to be an ally to black folk, it's still benefiting the white man because there's not, the conversation isn't there, the experience isn't there of it. So that's really interesting.
Playing off of what you guys are saying, I think it's really cool now. These documentaries, they all talk about history. Ours talked about like 1600s, 1700s. I don't know when yours took place.
It was roughly
about
around
same.
that time,
When you were just saying about how, well, first of all, you with how a black advocate didn't get as much attention. There's so many black artists now who are that are really breaking boundaries. They're so ballsy, and I think it's so cool because I don't know if you guys have heard of Tierra Whack. she's a black female artist who, like, in the opening line of one of her songs, she says, "If I was white, I would have blown up overnight."
I've seen that.
And then yeah, that's like crazy, and it's so true. And then also Lizzo, like, she's really big right now,
yeah.
and she talks about like woman empowerment, being fat, being black, being like, you know, having so many stigmas against you. And then, like, I think she was on a broadcast, I don't know, she was on something, and she said, she's like, white women really have a lot of power, and she like said it, and it's like kind of those things like we all like think but you don't really say.
Yeah.
And it was just really crazy, like,
Yeah.
it goes back to what you guys were saying.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
crazy, like how back then, like everything happened. It's just like like how you said, it's repeating its history, and then like it definitely, there was like, I know in our film, it showed that like the Dominicans like didn't really embrace their blackness, but like there was places like in the Dominican Republic that like they did like
Vodou, right?
Is that
what you're talking about?
Yeah, where they like did embrace like their culture, but like it wasn't a big percent of them, but like some of them did like embrace that, you know, they're black, and they didn't want to just say, oh, like the Spain conquered us, and so that's all we are, that's all we know, you know.
Can I add on to yours?
Yeah.
It was actually a group called Brotherhood of Holy Spirit of the Congos, and had been around for more than 500 years. And UNESCO, which I did not Google, I'm sure it's like preserved something from history. Sorry, it said that the Brotherhood is part of an oral patrimony of humanity protective status given to endangered cultural practices. So it's just crazy that a group that has been around for 500 years is quote unquote on the verge of extinction.
Yeah.
And then how you were saying in Brazil, how certain areas the masters and slaves were treated different or equal. It happened also in our video with Dominican Republic and Haiti, where in the Dominican Republic they had slaves for sugar crops, and as soon as all that started going to Brazil, the dynamics really changed between master and slave, and more worked towards like co-worker as equals, rather than in Haiti it was still, the separation was very obvious.
Yeah.
And then to add on to that, that's really interesting to hear, because it's like with the Cuban documentary, at least, or podcast, they claimed a lot that before the rising of Castro and everything, that it was a colorless country, essentially, because it's like no matter what, you were Cuban. It didn't matter if you were a white Cuban, a brown Cuban, or a black Cuban. But once Castro came into play, that's when the, I guess, color started being seen, in the sense where, because it was before the rise of Castro, I think Castro even united all of the black Cubans and white Cubans to fight together side by side in the war. And then once that war was over and they were like...
His regime had taken over?
Yeah, his regime started taking over, and he started talking to the Soviet Union and everything. That's when the whole colorism essentially within their country would like started and everything, because it's like in Cuba, I remember a quote was saying that in America you say I'm black but American too. I'm black and American. In Cuba you say I'm Cuban, I'm just a black one. So it's not necessarily like you're Cuban
so
or
positive.
black. Yeah, you're still Cuban, you're just a black Cuban. So I thought that was really interesting. And then with what you were saying, where there was the, what was it, a group? Yeah, they were really supportive of each other and stuff. It's really interesting because on the reading too, Black to be Latino, Latina, Blackness, and Black as foreigners in Latino studies, there was an agent, an INS agent by the name of Miss Gasio, and she actually detained and meticulously questioned a fellow compatriot of the Dominican Republic because she thought that they were posing as somebody from the Dominican Republic just because they were black. So it's like really cool, like not cool, but it's like sad again to see the distinction between like if you're a lighter Dominican Republic person or Dominicano, you're still going to question the authenticity of somebody who is darker than you. But no, yeah. Does anybody else have any thoughts on like how the readings could be improved or the films within themselves? I personally felt like the film opened up my eyes a lot more than the readings did, personally.
Me too. I agree.
Likewise.
Me too, just because I am very fair-skinned and we don't have really we're not really a mixed family, and where I come from, what's it called? I feel, and it's very ignorant to say that since it doesn't apply to me, we didn't pay attention to it, which is really fucked up.
It's fair though.
It's true.
It happens.
It's really true. So I like the fact that I like learned so much just from like this hour video, and I was like, that's crazy.
Same here. Well, awesome job, guys. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Giovanna Gonzalez.
I'm Evelyn Rivera.